Chasing Constellations, Captain Siggebield reclined in his command throne, fingers idly drumming the hilt of Tempest's Bite, in rhythm to a sea that lay many light-years behind him. The absidal windows of the Navis Astra Wigathane destroyer were shuttered by blast shielding, sealing out the maddening light of the immaterium. At the helm, Fear leaned forward in her throne, fingertips tapping the rim of her control console. Her eyes flicked from the hololiths to the ship's astropath Alward, who, as always, stood motionless by the armored viewport, staring as if he could see through the layers of ceramite and leaded glass into the roiling tides beyond. The Vox link to the navigation sphere whistled. Fear opened the channel with a brief hiss of static. "Bridge," the navigator's voice came through, calm but edged with strain. "Forgive the intrusion, Lady Fear, but the shadow is receding. I made a long pass to be sure." "Very well," she replied. "Still no idea what it was?" "No, my lady. Strangest thing. It was not storm nor body, not even a rift, more like an area of pure flatness." "Thank you," Fir said curtly, closing the channel. Behind her, Aylward turned from his post, though it was hard to tell if he had heard the exchange or merely seen it unfold in the warp. His face was pale, his empty eyes glimmering faintly in the dim lumen light. "Pure flatness sounds about right," he murmured. "Like the warp itself dropped from 5 dimensions into 2. Never seen the like of it myself." From the Vox pit, Garspiak, the ship's comms master, looked up from his array. "There's an old voidsman's tale from Incaloris," he said, his voice a rasp from years of recaf and ship smoke. "Speaks of a sheet of blankness in the warp tides, said to trap ships in real space, stop translation entirely, or swallow them if they try to pass through." Siggebield listened to their exchange in silence. The same debate had raged across the Welsix fleet for the past day. Warp storms were nothing new in the Arcana Inclusium, but this phenomenon, the so-called flat shadow, was recent. He had checked the Nitwortha archives of the Navis Astra Wigathane, though they stretched back barely 50 years. Cross-referencing with the data vaults of nearby forges, he found scattered references to similar events stretching back over a millennium. The earliest came from Forge World Sarathar, long before its decay into political rot. Siggebield did not interrupt the discussion. He preferred to let his crew think aloud. A wise captain, he knew, gathered the wisdom of others before adding his own. A tremor passed through the deck as the engines shifted tone, the deep, rising hum that preceded translation. The navigator's voice came through again, firmer now. "Translation in progress. We have reached the designated coordinates." Siggebield opened the ship-wide Vox. "Prepare for translation. All decks secure." He paused, then added with a hint of warmth, "Captain Hjorwolf, your presence is requested on the bridge." The ship trembled as the translation engines wound to their pitch. The Vox repeated Siggebield's order across every deck. "Translation in progress. All stations, brace and seal." A low chorus of confirmations echoed through the ship. Bridge officers fastening their harnesses, serfs locking down cogitator banks, servitors clamping their limbs to the deck as the Welsiax prepared to tear its way back into the material sea. Warning runes pulsed crimson across the hololithic display. Pressure vents hissed, incense burned to steady machine spirits, and the air filled with the deep, resonant thrum of reactor harmonics rising toward translation threshold. The bridge doors parted with a hydraulic sigh. Captain Hjorwolf, 10th Company, stepped through. He came in his full battle plate, storm blue ceramite chased with silver, helm under his arm, storm cloak folded across one shoulder. The light of the consoles ran in quick silver streaks across his armor as he strode to the command dais, boots ringing on the metal deck. Hjorwolf halted beside Siggebield's throne, giving a curt nod to his brother captain. The two men were a study in contrasts. Siggebield calm and still, a thinker's gaze behind the glimmer of his augmetic eye, Hjorwolf restless, like a blade half drawn from its sheath. Behind him came Wertweird Elfstan, the Void Revenants' chief apothecary. Where Hjorwolf was stern, Elfstan was all light and humor. His helm clipped to his belt, his eyes bright as if the warp's gloom were merely weather to be endured. He moved easily through the tension-thick air of the bridge, giving a few nods and smiles to the mortal officers who instinctively bowed at the sight of him. "Carrot, they help you see better in the dark," Elfstan announced cheerfully, leaning his vambrace on the rim of Fir's railing. Fur gave him a sardonic glance, unimpressed. No, seriously, Elfstan went on, holding up the vegetable like a relic. I had them genetically altered to aid ocular lenses. Fur arched an eyebrow but kept her gaze on her instruments. I'm Worthen, she said dryly. I already see in the dark. Oh, Elfstan grinned, biting off the top of the carrot, leaves and all. I'm from Medusa. Fear flinched and raised a hand. The stalk is poisonous. Elfstan only smiled wider, green leaves jutting from the corner of his mouth. I'm post-human, he mumbled around the mouthful. Oolitic kidney. I can eat anything. The bridge crew broke into nervous laughter. The tension, wound tight during translation prep, eased slightly, just for a heartbeat, as the apothecary's voice filled the void. Hyorowolf shook his head. Elfstan had a gift for dissolving fear. Perhaps that was as much a part of his apothecarian training as anything else. One of the last iron hands from the chapter's founding, he was a relic in his own right. Hyorowolf wondered, fleetingly, how the Void Revenants would endure once the old hands were gone. The navigator's voice cut through the mirth, precise and ritual measured, coordinates aligned. By the Emperor's light and the will of the machine, translation in 3, 2, 1. The deck lurched. Every lumen dimmed to blood red. The universe folded inward, then snapped open again. The destroyer Welsiax tore free of the immaterium, plunging into the cold silence of real space. Blast shields withdrew. Vox channels crackled as weapon officers confirmed readiness. Fur's fingers danced across her controls, steady and sure. In normal space, sire, she reported. All systems nominal. Outside, the stars of the Northern Arcana Inclusium blazed into view. To a Worthen's eyes, the sight was uncanny. On their homeworld, the night sky had always been split, blue to the left, red to the right. But here, that pattern was reversed. The stars that once flanked their world now hung between them and home. Sigibild rose slightly from his command throne. Auspex sweep. Hyorowolf unclipped a small reliquary from his belt, opening it to reveal a worn picked slate. A still image shimmered on its surface, one captured weeks earlier by a probe that had fallen through a Xenos portal. He glanced up at the stars. The alignment matched perfectly. Sigibild caught the look. Told you we'd find it, he said with a rare grin. Turning toward the wide obsidial windows, he gestured into the void. There, 3 primary stars in this sector, one ahead, one behind, one off our port, all roughly within a light year. He pointed to the leftmost glow, a vast orb burning with a strange viridian hue. Hyorowolf frowned. Why is it green? I find it offensive. Stars aren't green, Sigibild replied. Atmospheric scattering, likely dust or gas in planetary orbit refracting the light. Optical trick, nothing more. Elfstan leaned forward. Spectrographic reading, please, he called to the Auspex pit. If that dust is in orbital drift, it might mean a toxic atmosphere below. The Auspex officer transferred the data to the apothecary's new spheric link. Elfstan's eyes flickered as the figure streamed across his lenses. Emerald Pyre? He muttered aloud. How, in the Emperor's name, does that even happen? Sigibild gave a short laugh. We're in the Arcana Inclusium, Elfstan. Better not to ask. Out here, everything's strange one way or another. No threat to us, Lord, said Fear, scanning her console. Planet shows survivable atmosphere. The Auspex officer added, but not for long exposure. Elevated radiation levels, background, not lethal. Elfstan nodded. Nothing fatal. Short-term exposure should be tolerable. Good, said Hyorowolf. We forgot to bring any cataphracti with us. Or the Drownward, Elfstan added. Their Gastelm pattern armor's rad-proof, lighter than the 7th's Void gear. Hyorowolf rubbed his chin. He had only 2 scout squads aboard, their equipment basic at best. Then we won't tarry. The Auspex officer's voice rose again. The moon's readings are peculiar, my lords. Surface ferrite composition, virtually pure metal, no atmosphere. Radiation spikes suggest residual reactor sources. Recommend no landing. Fear frowned, double-checking her own displays. The moon's mass is low, too low for its size, gravity effect negligible. Structure suggests hollow interior or extreme porosity, honeycombed, perhaps. She looked up toward the approaching sphere, its edge limned in emerald light. Surprised the planet's gravity hasn't torn it apart, but it could explain the dust field, shattered fragments from an earlier impact. Sigibild's fingers drummed once against Tempest Bite's pommel. The galaxy's full of surprises, he said quietly, and mysteries best left unsolved. 1/4 thrust, helmsman. Let's not scratch the paint on that dust field. The Welsiax advanced, its engines humming like a distant choir, toward the green-lit world known in scattered Mechanicus records as the Emerald Pyre. As the Imperial destroyer passed over the moon and set course for the planet, its shadow drifted slowly across the barren surface. Below, the dust-covered plains shimmered faintly in the scattered emerald light, patterns of wind and static charge dancing briefly before settling once more into eternal stillness. The moon lay unmoving, dead and cold for so long that the sum of human history measured less than 1/10 of its geological age. Among the jagged ranges stood a single mountain, one of many, its flanks rising like a tower of basalt prisms. The outer shelves had long since collapsed into the valleys below, brought down by moonquakes that predated many of the surrounding stars. And somewhere within that mountain, a machine became aware. Dormant since the time when gods still walked the void, it had rested in dreamless patience while aeons turned to dust. Now, as the destroyer's shadow passed above, the ancient mechanism stirred. In the darkness, its sensors flickered to life. It looked, it scanned, it catalogued. Vast and alien logic engines turned within its buried vaults, sifting through libraries of decayed data, seeking a match for the object that had crossed its sight. There was none. So it calculated. Speed, mass, hull geometry, energy profile. The biological readings within, abhorrent to its protocols, triggered an ancient subroutine. Directive. Protect. No voice spoke it, yet the command resonated through cold circuitry and hollow tunnels of alloy. Deep below the surface, light, unseen for millions of years, flared to life. Vast conduits hummed. Docking arms, frozen in silence since before Terra knew flame, began to tremble. On the bridge of the Welsiax, Captain Siggebield rose from his command throne, using the golden wargheads on its armrests to steady himself against the shifting gravity field as the destroyer's plates aligned with the planet's mass below. He stepped down toward the viewport beside the astropath, Aylward. "Detecting anything we need to worry about?" Siggebield asked. Aylward inclined his bald head. His staff trembled slightly as he leaned his weight upon it. "I sense nothing." He paused, frowning. "No, not nothing. Nothing would be an absence of trace. Below, I sense an absence of something." He hesitated, searching for the words to make sense to non-psychers. It's like walking into a hall where someone should always be, but the throne is empty. Hjorwulf joined them, his armor whispering faintly as it moved. "So what's missing?" Aylward lifted his palm. "I don't know." A shimmer passed through the silk curtains of the silence chamber. 3 figures emerged, the ship's seer triad, pale and distant, their presence always unsettling. As all Navis Astra Wigathane vessels carried a backup of trained seers, their simultaneous appearance was rare. One, a woman with red hair, stepped forward. The other 2, both blonde, took positions equidistant around the viewport, forming a perfect arc. Siggebield inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. "It's as if all sound, light, and time have ceased," said one of the blondes, her eyes unfocused. The second spoke with quiet certainty. "There is no chorus here. Life always sings, even in death. But this song did not end. It stopped." The red-haired seer brushed a strand over her shoulder. "It feels like a tomb world," she said softly, "but the crypt has been abandoned." Siggebield nodded once. "Thank you for your insight." Behind him, Wurtwerd Elfstan stepped onto the dais, perching comfortably on the golden warg-head at the throne's arm. "Well," he said lightly, "now we know less than we did before." He caught Hjorwulf's disapproving glare and shrugged. "Come on, they know less than the astropath." Siggebield gave him a sharp look. "We know there is no presence down there. There was one once. Now it's gone. That makes it safe enough to land." Elfstan blinked. "Oh, missed that." He reached into a pouch, producing another carrot, and offered it to the red-haired seer. "Carrot?" he asked, as if nothing were amiss. She smiled, warm, almost human, and the sensation of it felt physical, like sunlight through a cold window. Taking the carrot, she nodded. "Good for eyesight, I believe." With that, she turned and walked back into the silence chamber, her 2 companions following, each offering a courteous bow to the officers. Elfstan looked at his last carrot, frowning. "Now I'm paranoid." Hjorwulf crossed to his side, snatched the vegetable from his hand, and slapped his pauldron. "I hope you're not too put off. We're going down there." He tore off the poisonous stalk and bit into it. Tell the launch bay to ready the drop ship, he barked, striding off the bridge. Sigibield arched a brow at Elfstan. Elfstan sighed, slid off the throne arm, and polished it with a cloth from his belt. Wouldn't want to leave fingerprints on command authority, he quipped, bowing slightly before following the 10th captain. Sigibield sat back, brushing the spot where the apothecary had perched. Fear, he said. Take us to geostationary orbit. At the Vox pit, Garspec hunched over his console. After a moment, he looked up. I'm getting something planet-side. Faint. Sigibield leaned forward. Survey team? Mining colony? Garspec shook his head, voice low and tight. No, my lord. It's a Void Revenants distress beacon. Sigibield's eyes narrowed, his attention sharpening like a drawn blade. Well, he said at last, a slow grin spreading across his face. That's interesting. A short time later, the Thunderhawk broke from the Welsiax's lower launch cradle with a thunderous crack of disengaging clamps. Its adamantine wings unfolded, servo hinges shrieking against the drag of void grit and heat. Atmospheric baffles snapped into position with a clang of obedience, and the craft's machine spirit howled in triumph as it hurled itself toward the world below. At the controls sat runesmith Hathred, augmetic fingers resting upon the flight console. Runes of stability flickered across his helm's display, while Benharic prayers spilled from his Vox grill in a monotone chant. The glow of the planet's strange, jade-tinged light refracted across his armor, turning the black Techmarine ceramite spectral and ghostly. Atmospheric entry in 10, he said, voice calm and metallic through the Vox. His augmetic eye tracked the Auspex sweep. A single lumen pulsed brighter with each revolution of the scanner. Signal strengthening. Definitely Astartes in origin, he murmured. Heorowolf tightened the clasp of his restraint harness as turbulence clawed at the hull. How's the landing ground? He asked, voice steady despite the shuddering descent. Hethred's augmetic eye flickered as he linked into the ship's Doppler arrays. Multiple structures, he replied, like low hills but solid-edged, manufactured. The image rippled into existence across the Astartes' noospheric links. Below, a broken city sprawled, scattered pyramids and half-collapsed towers, some sheared clean of their peaks. Roads ran in crooked lines, intersecting like the veins of some colossal corpse. Disorderly, ancient, but undeniably the remains of a city. Hethred grunted. Can't land there. Don't know if those structures can take our weight. Recommend touchdown outside the ruins, then ride in. Heorowolf nodded once. Concur. At the rear of the hold, Elfstan rubbed his gauntleted palms together. Oh, a ride, he said with a grin audible even through his helm. I've missed those. The Thunderhawk's descent burned across the clouds like a falling shard of iron, its roar echoing through the green-lit heavens as it carried its warriors into the waiting silence below.